Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Thursday, October 18th, 2012. I'm Darko. I'm going to cover the economy in this first video, and then hopefully in the second one we'll get into some eugenics, social engineering, and I'll touch on the election circus. First article I have is unemployment. The U.S. unemployment aid applications has jumped to 388,000. So I saw one article, it was an RT article, saying something about 40% of Americans are unemployed. So I don't know about that number, but I don't believe the number that the Labor Department puts out, which is usually around 8 to 9%. It's more about 18%, 20%. So that's people that are unemployed and no longer collecting benefits. So this is how they fudge the numbers. And of course they put out little news blurbs to people who don't know better, just they don't have time to look into this stuff, and they see a big headline: California reported a large drop in applications, pushing down the overall figure to the lowest since February of '08. Well, a lot of these jobs that people are getting are part-time work and low-wage jobs, basically. So that's how another way they're able to fudge the numbers. Jobless man sets himself on fire in Italy. In Greece, we've had economic suicides, as I call them. There has been actually at least one other self-immolation that I know of for sure. Could have been possibly two this year due to the economic environment. A jobless man has set himself on fire outside the presidential palace in the Italian capital city, Rome, highlighting the human cost of the economic crisis and the European state. I hate calling it an economic crisis, because really what it is a completely engineered crisis from the top down. That's why the New World Order, as they call it, some people call it, is order out of chaos, because it always seems to be some kind of crisis looming. The cliff, they're calling now this tax hike the fiscal cliff, right? Doomsday, Armageddon. So just to get you all scared so they can offer their solution. But really the reality of it is what? Is consolidation. I mean, I've went over the numbers for the past year or so. More than that, but the last year you can see it. It's blatantly obvious that the wealth has been accumulated into fewer and fewer hands. So, and more and more people are getting desperate. They're lighting themselves on fire. So, okay, so when I scroll down, they're actually talking about the other one, which was actually in Italy as well. So, too, said he was 54, suffered 85% burns after an incident in front of the chamber of deputies in central Rome on August 11th, facing economic difficulties losing his job, and had struggled for years with temporary work contracts that offer little protection or benefits. Then does that homeless guy have a higher net worth than you? I like this little illustration. There's the homeless guy, change, anybody got some change? And they show his net worth is positive 273. So this girl with her iPad or iPod and that, jogging, keeping healthy, is negative $2,000 credit card. Student loans, negative $66,000. Just a happy guy with a suit going to his job. It's a bank loan of almost $10,000. And the woman who's saying, sorry, can't afford any change, has multiple credit card debt of negative $10,000. So, and in the article, it basically makes the argument that, it's good for people like farmers and stuff like that. I don't know if it's really good, but people that have assets and not people that just have mortgages and car loans and stuff like that. It says most people should avoid debt no matter what the Federal Reserve says. So, global food reserves have reached their lowest level in almost 40 years. This year, the drought in the United States and elsewhere has put even more pressure on the global food supplies than usual. It says for the 6 of the last 11 years, the world has consumed more food than it has produced. As a result, the global food reserves have reached their lowest levels in almost 40 years, and experts are warning that if the next summer is similar to this summer, that it could be enough to trigger a major food crisis. Again, the food crisis, right? So the solution, of course, is there's too many people. We gotta have reproductive health care benefits, and you have to promote genetically modified food. And it's been projected that overall food prices will rise between 5 and 20% by the end of this year. One example is the drought-hit U.S. ranchers. Many of them had to kill off large portions of their herds because they couldn't afford to feed them any longer. There was one story I covered where they were feeding them candy or something like that, hard candy. Besides grain, which is also, there's a low amount of levels. Also, meat prices are saying are going to go up significantly as well. Anglicare says thousands are going hungry. This is from Australia. So they say that Australia's poorest are going without food sometimes for up to 24 hours. The report says up to 45,000 Australian households can't afford food, and that 22,000 adults going without food for a whole day. Most weeks, families are feeding their children on pasta and cereal several nights a week. Some parents avoid sending their children to school if they are unable to provide lunch for them. Also says going without food in a country as rich as Australia is something we should all be ashamed of. And this is sad because this is part of this economic system, a social system, and it inevitably is to lead to eugenics and calling off the population or useless eaters. So, because you can't just go wherever you want and start hunting and set up your own community or communes in the woods. You can't do that. They won't let you be free. They won't let you provide for yourself. You have to get on the grid. You have to get in the system. You have to get in a job. You got to pay your taxes. You got to do this. You got to keep moving. You got to keep moving in the brave new world. Otherwise you'll get left behind. They said they talked to some of us in detail about their children's anger, their sense of shame. The parents themselves talk about their own sense of shame and not being able to feed their children adequately. It goes on, sometimes they would keep their children home from school because they didn't have lunch, but it says this student says she regularly skips meals because there may not be enough food to go around. With the medication that my husband is on for his blood pressure and his heart, I make sure he's fed first. Finishing up here with this article, she says food is a low priority, but admits skipping meals does take a toll. Quote, I do get weak or sick from not having enough food, she says. Next, and that's one of the things too, they're trying to promote a meatless diet as well. And the elites themselves will also have organic beef themselves, so organic meat, trust me. UK food banks used by record numbers, says Trussell Trust. Again, Australia, now this is the same date, October 16th, a record number of people received emergency food from UK food banks in the last 6 months, a charity said. Then in the United States, this article, growing number of Americans can't afford food, says study, and this is from February 28th, but I thought I included in here. Here in the United States, growing numbers of people can't afford the basic necessities, food. Most Americans said they struggled to buy food in 2011 than in any year since the financial crisis. Then this article from July, Congress set to take food aid away from millions of hungry Americans. It was hailed by conservatives and moderates. They're pushing the 2012 Farm Bill. It goes on and says that it's in the name of reduction of the deficit. The House Agricultural Committee is proposing cuts of $16 billion from federal food stamps. The Senate version would cut $4.5 billion, even as they protect billions in crop insurance for large-scale farmers and insurance corporations. Cannabis factory couple who gave away their 400,000 pounds drug dealing fortune to the poor Kenyan village are jailed for 3 years. The pair paid for life-saving surgery computers in a hospital and schooling. Most unusual cannabis growing case in its type, says a prosecutor, and the couple in their 60s visited the village near the coastal town regularly. So yeah, they were illegally growing hundreds of plants in their farmhouse during a 6-year operation. Instead of pocketing money, they spent large portions of it on the people in the Kenyan village, paying for life-saving surgery, computers for an eye hospital, and schooling for poor children. Now, you know what's insane is that how come they don't have people like when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation go in there with vaccinations and try to sterilize people and circumcise them when they don't want to? Why don't they get arrested and hauled out of the country, Citigroup CEO walks off with $260 million after his bank loses 88% of its value. So he abruptly resigned today, which was on the 16th. Leaving the helm of the bank he guided through the financial takeover of 2008. So that's the way of the world, man. Actor Bill Murray to CNBC says, I think we ought to be personally responsible. So this is kind of an interesting article from October 2nd. He says Americans need to be more personally responsible for their well-being. I think if you can take care of yourself and then maybe try to take care of someone else, that's sort of how you're supposed to live. It's not a question of asking other people for help or being rescued or anything like that. He continued, I think we've gotten used to someone looking out for us, and I don't think any other person is necessarily going to be counted on to look out for us. Which he's right, especially when it comes to it's all about the cops. The cops there to protect us, serve and protect, and they're never really there to protect you. They're just there to protect the big banks when people start protests against the looting of their future, right? So it goes on and he says that the United States is a pioneer country, but that many seen seemed to forget the discipline of early Americans and what they needed to have just to survive. Occasionally it seeps in that they came in wagons from Illinois to Oregon or whatever, that they came in wagons and the wheels broke. He said the image leads to such thoughts as, gee, that must have been hard for those women to push wagons up that mountain. And he goes on and says that's what they had to do. He said there was no option but to do it yourself. You had your own responsibility. So, and of course, because it's the Hill, they're going to turn it to kind of political. And Bill Murray, I mean, his message seems kind of libertarian, and they try to push him into a party or something like that. It says, well, his comments were broad. They seem to play into the message of Republicans, right? The neocons. But he goes on and he says that he criticized both parties for their partisan bickering. He said they spend all their time just trying to destroy the other guy and not to work together, but to humble and humiliate the other so that they can't have success. He says it's not working to serve anyone anymore. And I don't want to sound like a Rotarian, but if you're not some sort of common good and you're not servicing your sort of partisan alliance, you're part of what's destructive. You're destroying something. In this article from October 16th, the rise of the super rich is a global phenomenon. So is it really? Oh, it's the rise. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. That's the economic crisis for some people, right? For a whole lot of people, right? The growing gap between the 1% and the rest of the U.S. population has emerged as a major issue in the presidential campaign, right? They're both elitists. They're funded by Goldman Sachs, the same people that help pillage Americans. So you know they don't care about that. It's likely to narrow much more no matter who wins. Says Chrystia Freeland, author of the new book Plutocrats, The Rise of the New Global Super Rich and the Fall of Everyone Else. She says it's not just the U.S., but it's happening in all Western industrialized countries. Big shocker here, and crucially, you're seeing the same phenomenon in the big emerging market economies, the developing nations. Those are the nations that are being built up, artificially propped up with your tax dollars and stuff like that, and in the guise of trade, free trade. So, but that's why they call it a brave new world. There's many reasons for that term, in a new world order. But you got to have a lot of money to be able to survive, right? To get yourself through the system, to get yourself through the legal system, to be able to just feed your family and yourself, right? Or you fall behind, right? The super rich and the fall of everyone else. The author says globalization is at the root of income inequality around the world. Also goes on and says inevitably that means the super elite see themselves as citizens of the planet Earth. Remember? That's what we've talked about that before, about we're citizens of the planet rather than as citizens of the home country. That's right. They have no allegiances or anything like that. That's why you call them travelers or technocrats. So they're less concerned with the health of the middle class in the U.S. and any other country they call home. So meet Mansa Musa of Mali, the richest human being in all of history. A new study has produced an inflation-adjusted list of the richest people of all time. And this individual of Mali, all the way back to the 14th century, African king, today is named the richest person in all of history. Second on the list are the Rothschilds family, whose descendants are still among the richest people on the planet, starting out in the banking in the 18th century where they raped and pillaged England and bought the entire country, and then said that the money has been divided between the hundreds of descendants, many of whom are business leaders today. That's right. Well, eugenicists and the guy who helped bring us all your medical institutions as far as education and also the educational sector, so brainwashing. Third on the list is the richest Americans to have ever lived were $340 billion today. So, yeah, see, they use all this money, and that's the one thing, they get things done. They put it into eugenics. They put it into propaganda. They have Reuters. I mean, that's who do you think owns AP and Reuters? It's them. It's the Rothschilds. That's what is king. That's how you vote. You vote with your dollar. And if these guys have all the dollars or all the resources and the hard assets, they're going to be making decisions unless people decide to pull away from that system. And of course, they're going to get a club over their head when they try to do that in a police state, which is all being set up. This is all planned, you know. As far as this siphoning off of wealth and what we were just talking about in the rise of the super rich, this is no mistake. You know, citizens of the planet. These guys have no allegiance to nations. I mean, it's kind of already like that, where corporations are the countries. I mean, you even see people make these Freudian slips where they'll try to use the word country and they'll call it a company, because it is. So it's global corporations run the planet, and you have these technocrats and these think tanks, private think tanks and institutions, charitable organizations running the planet. And it's just kind of a joke to think that you're going to vote somehow and bring about change, right, through the political system. So speaking of these guys in eugenics, Gap pulls a Manifest Destiny t-shirt and gets history lesson from outraged customers. So now they don't need a history lesson. They know exactly what they're doing when they're talking about survival of the fittest, right? Join me in part 2. This is GGN. I'm Darko. Thank you.